After my cousin's wedding, I logged into my account, wiped clean. My aunt chuckled. "We took it for the family, you'll survive." My hands trembled as I stood and said, "Then you won't survive what happens next." I, 32M, never thought I'd be the type to burn bridges with family. Growing up, my mother drilled it into my head that blood was everything, that we endured and forgave because that's what families did. But sitting in that hotel room at 2 in the morning, staring at my phone screen showing a balance of $0.17, I realized some bridges deserved to burn. The wedding had been beautiful. My cousin, my aunt's golden child, had spared no expense for her special day. Ice sculptures, a live band, centerpieces that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I'd been genuinely happy for her, despite the complicated history our family carried like inherited baggage. I'd even contributed $3,000 when my aunt came to me 6 months ago, explaining they were short on funds and asking if I could help make the day perfect. "Family helps family," she'd said with that warm smile that always made me feel guilty for even hesitating. I didn't hesitate, though. I transferred the money the same day. The reception had gone late into the night. I danced, made toasts, played the role of the supportive older cousin. Around midnight, I'd retreated to my hotel room, exhausted but content. That's when I decided to check my banking app before sleep, just a routine scroll through my finances. My savings account was empty, completely drained. $73,000 gone. My hands went numb. I refreshed the app 3 times, convinced it was a glitch. But the transaction history loaded clearly. A single withdrawal, processed that afternoon while I'd been getting ready for the ceremony. The destination was listed as an external account I'd never seen before. I called the bank's emergency line immediately. The representative confirmed what I already knew but couldn't accept. The withdrawal had been authorized through my online banking portal. Someone with my login credentials had transferred the entire amount. While I explained I hadn't made the transfer, she walked me through the security questions associated with the transaction. Every answer had been correct. My mother's maiden name, the street I grew up on, my first pet's name, information any family member would know. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, my mind racing through possibilities. Identity theft seemed most likely, except the timing felt too coincidental. My account had been fine for years, and suddenly it was emptied during my cousin's wedding. Morning came with a knock on my door. My aunt stood in the hallway, still in her silk robe, holding 2 cups of coffee. She asked if I wanted to join the family for brunch before everyone headed home. Her smile was the same warm, maternal expression I'd known my entire life. I told her I needed to talk to her about something serious. We sat in the small sitting area of my room. I explained what happened, watching her face for any reaction. She listened quietly, sipping her coffee, nodding in what I thought was sympathy. When I finished, she set down her cup and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Then she laughed, not a nervous laugh or a shocked laugh, a genuine, almost relieved chuckle that made my stomach drop. She told me she was glad I'd found out now rather than later, that it would have been awkward to explain. She said the family had made a decision about my money. They'd taken it for my cousin's wedding to cover the costs that had spiraled beyond what anyone expected. The expenses had gotten out of control, and I had more than enough saved up. I'd survive losing it. I was young, single, no kids. I could rebuild. My hands started trembling. I asked if she was joking. She wasn't. She explained it so casually, like discussing the weather. My uncle had helped with the technical aspects since he worked in IT. Getting into my account hadn't been difficult once they had my security information, details they'd pieced together from years of family gatherings and conversations. They'd waited until the wedding day itself because they knew I'd be distracted and wouldn't check my accounts until afterward. I asked about the $3,000 I'd already given them. She waved it off. That had covered the flowers. This was about making sure the day was truly perfect, truly memorable. And it had been, hadn't it? Didn't I enjoy myself? Wasn't my cousin radiant? I stood up. My legs felt like water, but I managed to stay upright. I told her in a voice I barely recognized as my own that if they thought I'd survive this, they were wrong. And they definitely wouldn't survive what happened next. She stopped smiling then. She asked what I meant by that, her tone shifting to something harder. I didn't answer. I simply opened the door and waited for her to leave. After she left, I made calls. First to the bank again, officially reporting the theft and requesting they freeze any further activity. Then to the police, filing a report for unauthorized access and theft. The officer who took my statement seemed sympathetic, but warned me that family disputes complicated these cases. I told him I understood, but I wasn't stopping there. My uncle worked for a mid-sized tech company as their senior systems administrator. His access to my account was criminal, but more importantly, it demonstrated a pattern of behavior. I started digging through my memories, pulling together every story I'd heard over the years about his work. How he'd bragged at Thanksgiving about being able to access anything. How security was just a suggestion if you knew what you were doing. How he'd once helped my aunt access her friend's email account during a dispute. I documented everything in a detailed email and sent it to his company's HR department and their cybersecurity team. I included the police report number and offered to provide any additional information they needed. I explained that their senior administrator had used his skills to commit identity theft and financial fraud against a family member. Then I turned to social media. I didn't post anything inflammatory or emotional. I simply stated facts. I discovered that family members had stolen my life savings during my cousin's wedding, using personal information and technical skills to drain my accounts. I was pursuing legal action and wanted friends to be aware in case anyone else experienced similar issues. I tagged my aunt, uncle, and cousin. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Comments flooded in within minutes. Friends expressing shock and support. Distant relatives who'd had their own uncomfortable experiences with my aunt's manipulative tendencies. Former classmates of my cousin sharing stories about entitled behavior and borrowed money never returned. The post was shared dozens of times within the first hour. My phone started ringing. I ignored the calls from family members. My aunt tried 6 times. My mother called crying, begging me to take down the post, saying I was destroying the family over money. I told her they destroyed the family when they decided I was an acceptable target for theft. By afternoon, my uncle's company had placed him on administrative leave pending investigation. A friend who worked there messaged me privately to say the cybersecurity team was taking the matter extremely seriously. Unauthorized use of technical skills for personal criminal activity was grounds for immediate termination and potential legal action from the company itself. My cousin's new husband called. He claimed he'd known nothing about the theft, that he was horrified, that his wife was hysterical. I asked him if he'd wondered where the extra money for the wedding came from. He went silent, then hung up. The police investigation moved forward. With the bank's cooperation, they traced the transfer to an account my uncle had opened specifically for this purpose. He'd apparently planned to let it sit for a few months before gradually filtering it back into their household finances. The premeditation made everything worse from a legal standpoint. Update 1. 3 days after the wedding, my uncle was arrested. The charges included identity theft, computer fraud, and grand larceny. My aunt was named as an accomplice. The local news picked up the story, a piece about a family torn apart by wedding expenses and financial desperation. They didn't use names, but anyone who knew us could identify the players. My mother stopped calling me. She sent a single text saying I'd gone too far, that I'd destroyed people's lives over something that could have been resolved privately. I responded that they destroyed my financial security without a second thought, and that private resolution had never been offered. They'd expected me to simply accept being robbed. The bank's investigation revealed that my uncle had accessed my account multiple times over the previous year, just checking balances, never taking anything until now. The pattern suggested he'd been planning this for months, waiting for the right opportunity. That premeditation meant the prosecutors were pushing for maximum penalties. My cousin tried to return some money. She showed up at my apartment with a check for $8,000, crying, explaining that she'd sold her honeymoon package and some wedding gifts. She swore she hadn't known the full extent of what her parents had done, that she'd thought they were just taking a loan I'd agreed to. I didn't accept the check. I told her that $8,000 didn't come close to $73,000, and that her ignorance, whether real or performed, didn't absolve her of benefiting from stolen money. She'd had the wedding of her dreams on my stolen savings. She needed to live with that. She called me cruel, said I'd always been jealous of her, that this was just revenge for childhood slights. I closed the door while she was still talking. The legal process ground forward slowly. My lawyer, paid for with money I'd borrowed from a friend, assured me we had an airtight case. The bank was cooperating fully, eager to demonstrate they took security seriously. My uncle's company had terminated him, and was pursuing their own legal action for violating his employment agreement and potentially exposing them to liability. Update 2. 2 months after the wedding, my aunt and uncle's house went up for sale. Legal fees and my uncle's lost income had devastated their finances. My cousin's marriage was reportedly struggling, the fairy tale beginning soured by scandal and debt. She'd started a GoFundMe to help her parents with legal costs, but it had been reported and taken down after I provided evidence that the funds would support defendants in an active theft case. I'd gotten my job to advance me some salary, and with that and my friend's loan, I was surviving. Barely. The stolen money had been my emergency fund, my security blanket, years of careful saving and sacrifice. Its absence left me vulnerable in ways I felt every single day. But I didn't regret what I'd done. Not for a second. The preliminary hearing arrived. I sat in the courtroom watching my aunt and uncle, looking diminished in their formal clothes, conferring quietly with their lawyer. My aunt looked older somehow. The confidence and warmth that had defined her presence completely evaporated. My uncle wouldn't meet my eyes. The evidence was overwhelming. Digital forensics had traced everything. The prosecutor laid out the timeline with clinical precision. The planning, the execution, the attempt to hide the funds. My victim impact statement detailed not just the financial loss, but the betrayal, the destruction of family trust, the emotional trauma of discovering people you loved viewed you as nothing more than an ATM to be cracked open when convenient. My mother attended, sitting on their side of the courtroom. That hurt more than I'd expected. She'd chosen her sister over her son, decided that the criminals deserved more support than their victim. I'd already accepted I was losing most of my family over this. Seeing her there just confirmed it. The judge denied bail reduction, citing flight risk and the severity of the charges. Trial was set for 4 months out. Update 3. My uncle took a plea deal. Faced with the evidence and his company's additional lawsuit, his lawyer convinced him that trial would only result in a harsher sentence. He pleaded guilty to all charges in exchange for a recommended sentence of 4 years, though the judge could impose more. Part of the plea required him to make restitution, though how he'd managed that while incarcerated remained unclear. My aunt, as an accomplice, faced lesser charges but refused to take a deal initially. She maintained that she'd only been trying to help her daughter, that I'd been selfish to hoard money while family struggled. Her lawyer eventually convinced her that a jury wouldn't be sympathetic to that argument. She pleaded guilty 2 weeks before trial was scheduled to begin. Her sentence was lighter, 18 months, but the judge added a substantial restitution order. Between them, they owed me the full $73,000 plus interest and legal fees. The judge acknowledged I'd likely never see most of that money, but the order would follow them for years. My cousin divorced 6 months after the wedding. Her husband, according to mutual friends, couldn't handle the scandal and constant drama. She'd moved back in with her grandmother, my aunt's mother, who'd apparently been one of the few family members disgusted by what had happened. I'd slowly begun rebuilding my savings. The bank, embarrassed by the security failure, had returned $10,000 as a goodwill gesture, though they maintained no legal liability. My uncle's former company had quietly settled their lawsuit against him and included a small compensation to me as the victim of his actions. Combined with my aggressive saving and the advance from work, I had about $20,000 in the bank again. Not nearly what I'd lost, but a start. Some extended family members had reached out privately to express support. Cousins on my father's side, my maternal grandmother who'd apparently had her own issues with my aunt over the years. These small connections reminded me that losing the toxic parts of my family didn't mean losing everyone. My mother and I hadn't spoken in 8 months. She'd sent a Christmas card with no note inside. I'd thrown it away without opening the envelope. My uncle began serving his sentence at a minimum security facility. Reports from family members still speaking to me suggested he'd become bitter and angry, convinced he was the victim of my vindictiveness. My aunt was due to begin her sentence the following month, after handling various personal affairs. The cousin whose wedding had started everything reached out through Facebook Messenger. She wrote a long message apologizing, explaining she'd been in therapy dealing with her role in what happened. She acknowledged that even if she hadn't known the specifics, she'd known her parents were desperate for money and had chosen not to ask questions when funds suddenly materialized. She'd been selfish and willfully ignorant. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She just wanted me to know she understood what she'd done wrong. I read the message 3 times and didn't respond. Maybe someday I would. But that day wasn't now. I'd started dating someone, a woman I'd met through work. I'd been honest with her about everything that happened, expecting it might scare her off. Instead, she'd listened, asked thoughtful questions, and told me she admired my spine. Having someone outside the situation see me as strong rather than vindictive helped more than I'd expected. Life moved forward. The hole in my finances slowly filled. The hole in my family remained vast and largely unfillable, but I'd accepted that. Some prices are worth paying for your dignity and self-respect. I never regretted standing in that hotel room and telling my aunt she wouldn't survive what came next. She hadn't. None of them had. They'd gambled that I'd be too weak or too committed to family harmony to fight back. They'd gambled wrong. The money had been important, but the principle had been everything. I wasn't someone who could be stolen from, betrayed, and expected to simply accept it because we shared blood. I'd drawn a line. And in doing so, I discovered exactly who I was when pushed to the edge. Someone who doesn't break. Someone who survives. Someone who makes sure the people who hurt him face consequences. I logged into my banking app, a habit now tinged with residual anxiety even months later. My balance showed 23,000 and some change. Not where I'd been, but climbing. I smiled slightly, closed the app, and went to meet my girlfriend for dinner. The family that had tried to destroy me was scattered, broken, facing consequences they'd never imagined. And I was here, still standing, moving forward, building something better from the ruins they'd left behind. Sometimes you don't survive by forgiving. Sometimes you survive by ensuring justice runs its course, no matter the cost.